3 Days of the Condor is like one of my favorites overall.
Yeah.
I think for me at least, it's my favorite of his collaborations with Robert Redford. And there are a lot of good ones, but that's always been my favorite. I think that's the epitome, along with the parallax view of the great paranoid conspiracy thrillers of the 70s.
It was definitely of its time, wasn't it? I mean, because we did this when we did our Pakula tribute show. It was one of those 70s paranoid thrillers that came a la Watergate, probably, and the whole government and our distrust of the government at the time. It was a big subgenre in the 70s. And this is a movie that more and more, and I remember seeing him on Charlie Rose years ago, and they said, this movie just becomes more and more relevant. People are discovering it, new generations, and it just keeps coming up. 3 Days of the Condor.
Wow.
It's one of those movies that has survived and thrived decade after decade.
Let me read to you the end of the movie, Cliff Robertson, who played Higgins, who I guess would be the villain of the piece, but his lines at the end, I have to read this. I'm at IMDb. I think it's one of the, to give you just in context, he's talking to Robert Redford's character, and here's what he says. He says, it's simple economics. Today it's oil, right? In 10 or 15 years, food, plutonium, maybe even sooner. Now, what do you think the people are going to want us to do then? And he's talking about all these things running out, things that we're talking about today. We have a food crisis. We have the oil crisis again. And it's just amazing how the film, it seems so topical by today's standards. Just with those last minutes of the film, I always I always find Cliff Robertson's lines very chilling at the end of that.
That's just it. It has more relevance today than it did then.
Yeah. I mean, every time I watch that scene, it's just wow.
To give you a little sense of Sydney Pollack, and this is probably why he was so dynamite as a director, and he was known as an actor's director as well. He's one of those in the school of Lumet who we're paying tribute to next week, where he's known as an actor's director. He started out as an actor on the stage. He studied with Sanford Meisner in New York, and that's where he was bred on the stage as an actor. And he turned to television directing early on in his career, and then he pretty much went into his collaboration with Redford right out of the gate. I think his debut film, something like War Hunt, was where he first met Redford, and then they went on to do This Property is Condemned.
Right.
But Jeremiah Johnson, 3 Days of the Condor, Out of Africa,
The Way We Were,
The Electric Horseman. On and on. That was a real fruitful collaboration between he and Redford. And looking at Redford and his style of acting, I can almost see why. Redford has a, and you can curse on this show, he has a very naturalistic, no bullshit way of acting. You feel comfortable with him the second he appears on screen. Much like Pollack, I think. In his performances, I think they were kindred spirits in that way, at least creatively. And obviously, his biggest success in his career, and one of Redford's too, was Out of Africa. It won him his first directorial Oscar,
right?
I believe, and he won Best Picture that year as well. Which this is interesting. I saw a video interview with Pollack where he talked about how he shot all of his early films in widescreen. And he always wanted he loved widescreen because it gave you a larger canvas in which to tell your story, obviously. And then pan and scan, when video came to be, they started doing the pan and scan, which is terrible, which is almost like whatever jerk in the video suite determines for you what you're going to pay attention to in the shot.
Exactly, yeah.
And he really hated that, and so to protest, he went to standard anamorphic format. And the first movie he did that with, out of all of his movies, Out of Africa.
Wow.
Which you always, it's the strength of that movie. You always think of Out of Africa, the wide sweeping vistas. You always think widescreen, but it's not shot widescreen.
Right. That's I did not know. That's incredible. I really would not think that one.
Yeah, and of course the movie that he's probably most beloved for is I would have to think Tootsie, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's one of the earliest. That's the earliest thing I remember actually seeing him act in, and he's great. I mean, he is wonderful in that.
Yeah, he is. He is very wonderful, and it's just a funny movie. And that movie plays. It never stops playing.
Right.
It just keeps making you laugh every year when you revisit it.
Mm-hmm.
There's just new pearls in that movie, and actually, it's a brave movie on a couple of fronts. It's brave because essentially what Dustin Hoffman is doing in that movie, and Pollack knows it full well. Dustin Hoffman is parenting himself,
mm-hmm.
because Dustin Hoffman's reputation up to that point was as a real hell of a talent to be involved with,
mm-hmm.
just somebody that just gave their directors hell and argued and hemmed and hawed over every single aspect of every moment of the character, and
mm-hmm.
and it became the stuff of parody with Tootsie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were smart enough to turn that concept on its head about this actor no one wants to deal with, so he has to pretend like he's a different sex altogether to get a job in show business.
Yeah.
And their chemistry together is just amazing. The whole scene about the singing, dancing tomato.
Exactly. That's great. That's classic.
Nobody will hire you, and all this kind of stuff. It's phenomenal stuff. And I always remember my favorite line in that movie is, I can't remember it verbatim, but they're too close when she's dressed up as Dorothy for her screen
mm-hmm.
screen debut on the soap opera. She's not a very attractive woman, so the camera's too close, and they said, "Can you back that up? How far can you back that camera up?" And the camera was like, "What do you think of Cleveland? What do you think about Cleveland?"
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's beautiful.
That is.
One of the great comedy.
Bill Murray.
Yeah, go ahead.
Bill Murray's great in that.
Yeah, he is, and it has great casting forward and back, and it was really, and this was a source of animosity on the set, I read. It was really Pollack's idea to take it in the direction of a romance between he and Jessica Lange's character,
mm-hmm.
and something that could not be for the longest time because of, obviously he was known as a woman on the set, and he was falling in love with his female co-star, and
right,
and really a charming kind of relationship there, and it's very telling that Jessica Lange picked up the Academy Award for that, because for her it felt like a nothing part.
Right.
But under Pollack's direction, I mean, that part just shined.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. What other kind of directorial? Absence of Malice is another one. It came out in 1981.
Yeah, that's the first thing I think I saw. We went to go see that in the theater, and that's Paul Newman, and he's in top form in that. And that was a very interesting movie. What was it? What is that movie referred to as? Sort of like the
invasion of the press. I mean,
the invasion of the press, like the anti All the President's Men.
It really kind of was, yeah. And some people read it as a response to All the President's Men.
Mm-hmm.
He was in love with movie stars. I've seen this referred to a lot in his obituaries. He liked movie stars. I mean, and he worked with all the big ones, Harrison Ford, later on in his career, Robert Redford, Jane Fonda, on and on and on. I mean, big movie stars. But
Harrison Ford.
And he made mainstream films, but they were always about something,
mm-hmm.
He made Absence of Malice about something, and Tootsie was a commentary on something as well.
Right.
Out of Africa. I mean, these are stunning movies.
They are. A.O. Scott, I think it was A.O. Scott, and you'll forgive me because I read two different appreciations first thing this morning before I left for work, but A.O. Scott, I believe, compared him to William Wyler, which I think is a fair and very good analogy. He had that kind of range, like Wyler, and I thought that it was a very telling comparison.
He did have a great range, and there's something to be said for directors that have as equal a range as the great actors. We always talk about the actors and having tremendous range, but it's important for directors too. I mean, he was not a director that could be pigeonholed, except for the fact that he made, for the most part, mainstream entertainment, where he talked about issues. He brought issues into the fold. Very smart. I mean, all of his movies were very, very intelligent. He made movies for adults.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, he absolutely did.
And that's something that happened in Havana. While not a great movie, I'm not going to defend Havana, but Havana was aimed at adults, and I think at the time that's probably why it didn't do that well. Is because your target audience, especially in the Christmas break of 1990, was going to see other stuff. They weren't interested. Yeah. Havana was a very old-fashioned movie.
Yeah,
and people weren't interested.
Yeah, and actually, Havana. I read an interview with him afterwards, and he said, I realized Havana tanked, and he said, honestly, if I knew what was wrong with that movie, I would have fixed it. It was very frustrating for him because he, when you live with something so closely, you don't have distance from it. He said, "Tell me how to fix the movie. I don't know." And sometimes that's just how movies go.
Yeah, that's true.
But I'm taken by a couple of his other projects. Jeremiah Johnson, he's never been known particularly as a visual director, but I think out of every movie in his resume, Jeremiah Johnson is the one that relies most heavily on the visual.
Even more so than Out of Africa, you think?
I think so. There's very little dialogue in Jeremiah Johnson.
No, there's not much at all.
Yeah, it really is reliant upon image to tell its story. And I think that's what made that a little different, a little bit of a different kind of Western.
That's true.
Milius had his hand in the in the early script drafts of Jeremiah Johnson, and Pollack would say, and he had he went so overboard with, cutting out a deer and taking out its liver and biting into it.
That's Milius.
That's Milius, and Pollack was more meditative. I mean, his version of the West of this particular story was a lot more kind of it's maybe spiritual in a way.
And that's not Milius. Milius is a lot of things. Spiritual is not one of them.
It's very telling that Milius ended up loving his cut of the movie. And sometimes movies wouldn't work for whatever reason. And Havana's one. Bobby Deerfield's another one. With Pacino, we've paid lip service to that on the show before.
Right.
And some of them are so unique, where he would take a Hollywood contraption like a John Grisham novel, like The Firm.
And I liked The Firm. I enjoyed it.
I love The Firm, and of course it's he and Tom Cruise, and they acted together in Eyes Wide Shut, and we're going to talk about that in a second. The Firm is very unique. I mean, you go no further than the piano score from Dave Grusin,
right?
In a thriller, in a Grisham thriller. A solely piano score. Ballsy, but it works somehow,
Yeah, it does, and once again, he didn't do too well with Havana, but here once again he made at the time, and especially the summer of 1993, The Firm, along with In the Line of Fire, were considered adult-targeted movies, and The Firm being based on a John Grisham bestseller. He hit the bullseye with that film. People would be copying that. How do you bring a John Grisham film to the screen for many years? That would be the film you use.
Yeah. The last feature film he directed was The Interpreter, and the last project he was directed. And this would actually be my pick. I saw it last year, and I was completely taken by it. If I had to pick a Pollack movie, like a little jewel that possibly people haven't heard of before, it's called Sketches of Frank Gehry, and it's Pollack's first documentary about the famous architect Frank Gehry, who he was close friends with for many years. And it's the only documentary he's ever attempted. He doesn't know anything about architecture, so he's going in completely cold on all fronts. But how it came to be, he's always been friends with Frank Gehry. Gehry made it clear to him that people were after him to do a documentary, but he's very shy and he didn't want to take part in it. And then eventually one day he said, "Would you consider doing it?" And he said, "Well, I don't know anything about documentaries. I certainly don't know anything about architecture." And Gehry said, "Well, that's why you're perfect." So, and it really is, because you get a look into the creative process from someone who was completely fresh. And it is a stunning movie about someone that really thinks outside of the box when they create these buildings. I mean, these are stunning looking, almost like the work of a crazy man. You see some of these.
Well, no, he is, and that's what was great about the film. For people who don't know who the subject matter is, it's a wonderful introduction to him. It's a great introduction, really.
Yeah, it very much is.
And that's
of course,
his first documentary. That's incredible.
Yeah. His producing. He took on the role of producer most often in his career, and his producing credits are amazing. Outside of his own work, he produced the works of others. Bright Lights, Big City, Fabulous Baker Boys, Presumed Innocent, Dead Again, Searching for Bobby Fischer, Flesh and Bone, Sliding Doors, The Talented Mr. Ripley,
The Quiet American,
Iris, Cold Mountain, and even as of late, Michael Clayton, in which he also gave a dynamite performance. And I mean, these are movies that bear his stamp. Even if he's just the producer, you could see him easily directing these movies too. They seem to have a common feel to them, don't they?
They do. And what's very sad though is that some of these movies that he produced were directed by the late Anthony Minghella, someone who also left us very suddenly this year. And there's something I don't know. I can't believe they're both no longer with us, but they seem to be a perfect fit.
Yeah.
The more I think about it, their styles and everything, and I just see, you'll have to forgive me, it's just hard to believe that neither one of them is here anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. And as an actor, he was in the last season of Entourage. I was just reminded of that looking over his credits, but he did a lot of TV early on as an actor. Obviously, we already made it clear that he started out as a stage actor. Some of his most awe-inspiring works as an actor, and he had a couple of performances that were just beautiful. Husbands and Wives.
Oh, he's great in that.
Oh, my God.
He's just incredible in that.
And what's amazing to me is that relationship, for him to come from directing and then give himself up to directors for their work, like Husbands and Wives, and all these other things he did. I wonder what that chemistry was like.
That's got to be it's got to be interesting. But he was good in that. And I think he's like the one having the most fun on Eyes Wide Shut. He
is, and we talked about this earlier. Kubrick, he does 100 takes of everything, and it kind of, you could see it wear on the performances, and maybe that's what he was going for, this kind of zombie-ish, dead-style delivery. And you could see, this is where I'm coming from, and you could see, like, the actors are drained in his movies, but Pollack, I mean, he's still as vivid as he is in any other movie. He's alive.
And he was not the original choice for that.
No, he was a replacement for Keitel, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's quite a... I would feel very nervous about stepping into Harvey Keitel's shoes, but he did a bang-up job.
But it's telling, too, because this is one of our great directors putting himself in the hands of another one of our great directors, Kubrick. And I'm sure it just made him a better director, each time out acting. That's why he's known as an actor's director, because he empathizes so much with them. He knows where they're coming from. It's funny with Eyes Wide Shut that the first day he shot was when he greets Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman at the party in the beginning.
Right.
And he says, just mosey on about, have a party, have a good time, blah, blah, blah. They did it in a take or two. And Pollack looked over at Tom Cruise and said, "Man, well, this is a piece of cake here." Cruise started laughing and said, "Just you wait." Then they went on to the pool table scene, which is this big 15-minute dialogue scene in his study with the pool table and everything, the big climax of the picture. And they shot one take when he goes to the door and answers it, and Tom Cruise is there. And Kubrick said, "That's good. Could you do it about a quarter slower? Could you walk to the door about a quarter time slower?" And he said, "Sure." So he does it. And they said, "Okay, just about a third slower than that." I said, "Sure." And this went on for like 3 months. They shot this one scene for months.
I don't know how people did that, I just don't know how, because it seems to take a toll on some of the actors.
It makes his performance even more breathtaking, too, when you think about what would be. He was on The Sopranos when the last season, He
was great. He was incredible.
Yeah, he was great.
He really was.
And, of course, Michael Clayton, which is probably the last great performance we've got from him.
And you're not counting Maid of Honor?
No, I'm not. Only because
I'm not either.
But Michael Clayton was and he's paired with a movie star in George Clooney that is of equal merit, I think, because they're both such welcoming presences. They both make you feel at home, like right away. He and George Clooney.
Yes.
You're already there with them just by the nature of them existing in the frame.
Yeah.
And just a beautiful performance of Michael Clayton. I mean, if you had one Pollack movie, whether it be, even the Recount, the HBO movie that premiered this past Sunday, was a production of Sydney Pollack. At one time, he was going to direct, and he ended up producing. If you had one directorial project that you could recommend from Pollack's resume, what would it be?
All right, one of each.
Either way, I've given my sketches of Frank Gehry, which you see Pollack in that movie too, so you get a sense of who the man is.
I would say I like him. I love him in Tootsie, as far as his acting. Because I love him in Michael Clayton, but I think he's great in Tootsie. I can't beat around the bush there with that one. But there is one movie, and I didn't see it. I didn't even know he had directed it until 15 years ago. That I know a lot of people hate, and we've talked about it on the show before, but I love it. The Yakuza with Robert Mitchum.
Yeah,
I love that film. I love that film. I think it's great.